Welcome to the Storytelling That Sticks for Business and Life podcast. I'm your keynote, TED Talk and story coach, Doug Stevenson. In this podcast series, I'm going to share with you some simple and practical storytelling techniques and hacks that will make you stand out from the competition so that you can get paid to speak, or to give a TED Talk that goes viral, or to simply tell your story in a way that makes a difference in the world. You'll learn how to choose, craft, and deliver stories that stick. Personal stories from your amazing life, business stories, leadership and sales stories, stories that are marketable and memorable, stories that sell you and your product or service. My job as your virtual keynote and story coach is to help you design and deliver stories and speeches that get people to do what you want them to do, or to consider a new perspective. If you're serious about using storytelling to advance your career, to get paid to speak, or simply to get your message across in a more engaging and compelling manner, this podcast is for you. All right, well, let's get started. A lot of my listeners responded incredibly positively to my podcast about TED Talks.
Nice.
And it is the most watched and viewed and downloaded of all of my podcasts, which tells me people are fascinated by TED Talks. They watch them. They learn
They want to
from
give them, and they want to give them.
They also want to give them.
Yep.
But it's this thing, it's this amorphous, like, okay, I'd love to give a TED Talk. How do you go about it? How does it work? What is the whole thing? And so that's why I did that presentation about TED Talks, what you need to know about giving a TED Talk. So here are the questions in a sequence, and you can just go off in whatever way you want to. So the first one is, what was your idea worth spreading?
So when I started the idea for my TEDx talk, I had this idea that clutter kills. I knew I needed something that felt abnormal. I needed something that wasn't just what anyone would talk about when it comes to their clutter. And I wanted something to stretch. And I liked this like haunting clutter kills. But the truth is that my take on clutter is actually clutter helps bring you to life. Clutter reveals your most intimate nature and truth in the most positive way. And so when I did my talk, I recorded it and sent it to Mary, and she was like, yeah, but it's not quite right. And we just flipped it on its head. And instead of going with the common perception that clutter is bad and negative and harsh, we went with the other, which is clutter is a hero. Clutter is a friend.
Once you had that, the next question is, how did you approach recording the video? Did you do lots of different takes? Did you just sit down once and do it and submit it? Did you time it? Did you rehearse it? How did you go about doing that? Because I remember watching it and thinking, ooh, okay, this is a keeper.
Thank you. So I was living in Carmel, California at the time, and my ex-boyfriend, who was still a dear friend, his dad was super into AV, and they had a green screen room essentially. And I said, hey, do you guys mind shooting me for this TEDx audition that I want to do? And so I basically had written the talk, had memorized it loosely. I'm not a very strict memorizer. I like to have an outline and just see what's there. I like to leave room for the magic. And I went to their house. I went down into the basement, into the green screen room. He shot me. We did it in one take, in and out. But I will say I'm a little bit of a unique bird in the fact that I used to be an actor, as I know that you did as well. So I have a lot of comfort in front of a camera. I have a lot of comfort with the script. I've got a lot of ease in when I'm presenting. And so it just, and I think the other thing too, is that I am just so clear on what I'm here to share. I'm clear on who I'm here to help, why I'm talking to them, what I want them to get from it. So even if you took my script and ripped it up, I could step in front of a crowd of 3,000 right now and just talk because I feel so connected to my purpose and my calling in this life.
Well, that's interesting because you say that I was very, very clear in my purpose. Had you been speaking about this prior to submitting this TED Talk? Had you given this talk in front of audiences and kind of honed it over time?
No, I had been a member of Toastmasters and I had spoken on lots of different facets of clutter. The tricky thing with being a business owner who speaks, it's slightly different because you're trying to always drive business back to your business. You're trying to give lots of value and be of service. But this was different because I knew, as we all know with TEDx, that my stakes had to be my stakes had to be through the roof. It had to be very high, very powerful. It had to be different than anything else that was out there. So I hadn't given this talk before. In fact, I had been put in touch with a TEDx speaking coach in San Diego who very generously mentored me in writing the talk. And I think we took a couple of weeks to write it. But the truth is that what I created with him transformed radically when I started working with you and Mary and the TEDx Tucson team. And when people ask me about TEDx in general, one of the first things that I say to them is I say, you have to know what your idea is. Like, what's your idea worth sharing? It's not about being a good speaker. It's about having a clear intention of what you're here to share with the world. And secondarily, find an amazing community like the one in Tucson, because I have seen people who've done TEDx's in a cafeteria with horrible lighting or bad recordings or no sound. And I was so blessed to be with you all. You held me accountable to the level that I like to be held accountable to, which is right out of my comfort zone. I don't need you to be nice and tell me I'm a good speaker. I want you to know what I'm capable of and push me to my limits in the best possible way. And I really feel like you and Mary did that. And you gave me a beautiful product to leave with. I have this wonderful talk that has gotten 250,000 views and gives me so much credibility and gives me so much of a platform to stand on, more so than the 30 plus TV shows that I've appeared on as an expert, because the TEDx community is so respected.
Yeah, it really is. It's a badge of honor to be able to say I've done a TEDx talk, but also the fact that you've had 250,000 views. Let's talk about that a little bit, because a lot of people, they do a TEDx talk, they get a good video, and not all people walk away from a TEDx talk with a video at all, which is something that I talk about in my podcast on TED Talks. Is like, don't assume that all TEDx's are equal and that you're always going to walk away with a quality video. You did, because we had a really professional production. How did you leverage it? How did you manage to get it up to 250,000? Did you work it?
Oh, I worked it. I worked it so hard. I worked it like it was my job. The minute you have material like that, you need to be ready to hit the road with it. Now, what I did that wasn't great. So, how will I put this? So, when you do big promotion of yourself through a TEDx or a TV show or anything like that, it's really important. Of course, now we're on social media. We can talk about it. You promote it, you cross-pollinate, you call, I remember I called Toastmasters and said, hey, I just did a TEDx talk. Do you want this? It becomes a calling card. You start to find your way into other avenues where people are very interested in you as a TEDx speaker, you as an expert. And so I was calling magazines and getting cover stories, and I was getting interviews and podcasts, and that was really great. Now, here's what I didn't do as well. I almost did it, but it wasn't totally there. I didn't have all of my back end set up to receive the inflow that would come, meaning that I had like a contact form. And this was a few years ago. So we're going to be gentle. I'm going to be gentle on myself. But it was, I had a contact form where people could sign up and join my mailing list. But what you really want to have is you want to continue to give away free information. You want to have what they call lead magnets, free gifts that you give to people. Hey, I'm going to give you a free copy of my book. I'm going to give you this free checklist if you sign up. Because what ended up happening is that when my TEDx talk got the biggest hit, and I don't know where it came from. That's the funny thing with having these big promotional things. Like yesterday, I had an NPR episode re-air live, and I was getting messages from all over. I had like 100 new subscribers in an hour. It was like, I was like, something just hit. But you want to be ready for that, because when you start getting that attention, people look for you. You want to be easy to find. You want to have free things that you can give to them so that you can get them on your mailing list. And I didn't have all of that as dialed in as I could have when it first came out. And so we're talking about thousands upon thousands of people looking for me. And it would equate to maybe some subscribers, but I wasn't really getting them where I needed them. So that's one thing that I've adjusted greatly, having walked that path and noticing that I didn't get as much of an ROI for my own business as I could now. Whereas now I have evergreen programs people can buy and they can join my mailing list, and I have virtual offerings, and there's so much there for them. I don't have to touch. I mean, I made so much money yesterday just sitting at my desk because I had those things in place already, knowing that there's lots of promotion that's happening even when my hands are off my business.
Yeah, you're talking about the back end and making sure that your back end is there
Hugely.
so that when people start coming to you, you know what your offerings are, you know how much they're going to cost, what your price point is going to be, you know how to monetize that. And I think a TEDx talk, I talk about TEDx talks going viral. Well, people think viral is like 10 million. 250,000 is kind of viral enough to really transform your business.
And I speak on a niche topic. I talk about home organizing and more specifically the emotional back end of home organizing. I'm not for everyone. I mean, that was the interesting thing with the NPR. The exposure was huge, but they were not my ideal audience. So you get big exposure, but maybe not to your ideal person. So the more niche that you can speak on in your TED Talk, the more clear you are about who you are in your industry and what you're here to give, the more that the right people will find it. I don't need everyone to see my TEDx talk. I need the right people to see my TEDx talk. And that goes into the planning process of what am I speaking about? What are we going to call it? Who are we serving? Who am I talking to? And I think that's worth mentioning too. When you're writing your TED talk, when you're delivering the TED talk, you're not speaking to an audience of 500. You're talking to one person. In an ideal world, you are talking to one human, making eye contact with lots of different people, but you are talking to the one person who needs you the most. And that's what makes a big difference when it comes to creating something that's going to continue to have an impact in your life and the lives of the people who watch it.
Right, right. And conceptually, as you're thinking about what is my idea worth sharing, how am I going to brand it? How am I going to create this talk? How am I going to write it and present it? It's brilliant that you say, well, just think about that one person. You're not talking to the world. You're trying to speak to what is the pain that somebody out there is feeling, that when they hear me, they're going to go, oh, she is part of the solution.
Yes. When I wrote my book, I wrote a book this year called Why the F Am I Still Not Organized? I wrote it to one person. I picked a friend and I said, can I write this book to you? Will you read it and give me your feedback? And it made it so powerful because when she would write, oh, I think you're full of it when you say this. I wrote in the book, I know when you read this, you probably think I'm full of it, but I'm not. And here's why. So I used her real response to make the book better. And it was the same thing with the TEDx talk. One thing that I will say is limit how many people you ask opinions from. Doug, you were my primary person that I went to. The second person that I went, well, obviously you and Mary. And then the second person that I went to was a friend named Adam. And Adam does storytelling for corporations. That's what he does. Very similar to you, but in a different genre. He does it for wildlife films. And he was the only person that I showed the talk to, and he and I worked it. And so when I was doing it, I was only giving this talk to 3 humans that I really trusted. And I was willing to listen to you all and be vulnerable and open. And that made such a difference because if I had shown this talk to 20 people, I would have been given 20 different points of view. And instead, I got the 3 most qualified, powerful opinions that made my talk really, really great.
When I was given the opportunity, because I've done 2 TED Talks, and both times they offered me a coach. And both times when I had my first meeting with a coach, they both said, I can't help you. You know more about this than I do. You're way beyond me. And I realized, oh, TED organizations grab anybody they can and call them a coach. And they tell them, you're going to coach this person. And a lot of times they're not even professional speakers. One of them was a university student.
I was really fortunate because you were a TEDx coach and you have so much experience. The gentleman who helped me write my talk initially, he was a professional speaker who had a lot of experience. Adam had a lot of experience telling stories on television. And I have this general belief, I want to be the worst person in the room. In fact, if I enter a room where I am the best there, I look for another room because I want to stretch and grow and I want to learn. I don't feel knocked down when someone is better than me. I feel inspired. And so finding someone like it was so great. And it was difficult doing it from afar. But the truth is, I just came to town anytime we had a rehearsal or something was going on. I'm grateful that I lived close enough and my family was in Tucson so I could do that. But it, you know, being able to work this and I tell people like, so I don't memorize my keynotes that I give. I don't memorize. I have my slides. I know where I'm going. I know my stories. I know my deal. But this TEDx talk, I knew when I was breathing. I knew when I used the word the. I watched that and I was like, crap, I really messed that one word up because it was so fine tuned. And for all the speaking I've ever done, this was the only one that made me feel really nervous because the stakes were so high. I remember 2 weeks before we went, I got hit with a panic attack. And I've never had, I mean, literally, I'm not joking, Doug. You could say, Star, walk through that door. There's 3,000 people. I'd like you to give a talk on a topic that will tell you the minute you hit the center of the stage. I'd be like, great. And I'll walk out and do it and kill it. And it will feel great to me. But for some reason, 2 weeks before, I had like so much adrenaline, so much. It was just, it felt like what it really felt like is to give a TEDx talk. You have to push yourself and grow in a way that most other speaking opportunities don't require of you because their intention is so clear. So it pushed me to a place that I didn't know I had within me. And I am so grateful that it did.
Well, one of the things I think, because when I did my second TEDx talk, I took it really seriously. And having already been a professional speaker for 15 years, maybe 20 years at that time, I worked harder on that 10 minutes than I'd worked on anything because it's only 10 minutes.
Well, that's
And
the
it's
thing.
going to be video recorded and go out into the world. And it's a TED Talk. So it has a branding that nothing else has. And therefore, the stakes are potentially way higher. And so, yeah, we take it way more seriously.
Well,
So, yeah,
and
there's
that's the
going to be
thing.
nerves.
If I do a keynote for an hour, I've got a lot of time to mess up, to bring you guys back in, to fix things, to play, to add. I have time for that. So you all were very generous. You all gave me the closing position, which is
Right.
so powerful. And you gave me 14 minutes, which was unheard of because no one else got 14 minutes. And it was just, I mean, I knew what power I had, but to take a lifetime of purpose, calling, intuition, information, and try to distill it into 14 minutes is insane. It's so hard. It's so much harder to speak to a smaller audience and so much harder to speak to a smaller amount of time. It will push you in ways, even as professionals, we know, there's no editing. It's just, it is what it is, and you're going to give the best you can. And you have no control over it at all. It's just going to live in its world without you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons why it's really helpful to have a supportive coach before getting you prepared so that the entire history of the coaching leads into the day of.
Yes.
And on the day of, the coach can also be there to just hold your hand or look at you or give you a hug and be supportive. And now
And I knew I could trust you. Yeah, I felt safe. Like I knew that if I was wearing something that was inappropriate, you were going to tell me. I knew that if I was saying a line that was wrong, you were going to tell me because we had the same goal. You were helping to support my goal in having this idea out in the world. And that, I mean, you want someone who's invested in your idea and who has the experience and the chops to help take you to the next level. Like some of these things are tricky. Like as speakers, we need to have ensembles ready that we know work without thinking about it. I wasn't at that point in my career to be able to do that. And so part of it is like this experience and then working with a professional like yourself really makes sure that all of the things, all the systems that you need to have in place in order to show up and do your job right are in place. And that really is where having a great coach helps because walking onto that stage, I don't have to think about how I look, how I sound. Is my talk okay? Because it's been vetted so well that you can just get up there, throw the script away, and fly.
well, also, what you say it was an advantage to go last. For many people, that's not an advantage because you get to sit backstage and wait and wait and listen and get more and more nervous and peak too soon and then lose your energy. And it's
Mm.
like, as someone who's done this, it's like, depending on how many speakers are on that cohort that day, that program that day, you might be first, you might be fourth, you might be seventh, you might be 10th, you might be 12th. Well, for you to be last, you're thinking closing speaker, nail it, great. However, energy wise, that also gave you all that time to be freaking out about your outfit.
Well,
And
I get,
everything makes a difference in TED Talks. Your
yes,
wardrobe, your shoes, your talk, your preparation, your breathing, your
yes. It's a story.
nutrition.
You are telling a story from the second your title is read and you're walking on that stage. And so, and it's funny, like I wasn't nervous the day of the talk. I have this, I'm a very, again, very unique bird. The day before the talk, total panic about my outfit, total panic. The day of the talk, I don't care. I'm going to just put on something and go because I have a job now. And so for me, when I get into that zone, and I remember sitting there and watching everyone, and I loved going last because I was, instead of sitting there, I don't know, and being disoriented or like out of my body because I just done this thing, I'm watching everyone and I felt like I was feeding on the audience and watching these people who I'd been like joyfully creating with for the past 3 months kick ass and take names. And like, I felt so high by the time I stepped on that stage because I felt like my family had just, like, I succeeded every time each one of them succeeded. The day of nerves is not nearly as bad as the 2 weeks prior nerves. That like almost killed me. I was not ready for that.
Yeah, well, we all suffer from different insecurities that show up in different ways and different times. And learning to work with yourself, to be humble and gracious and compassionate about ourselves, and to just acknowledge it's like, okay, I'm nervous and I'm insecure, and here it is. And as you say, and I have a job to do. So come on, let's suck it up, let's get it together, and let's go.
Yeah.
The last thing here is to just consider someone listening to this podcast, watching this podcast on YouTube, and they're thinking about it. It's on a bucket list. It's like,
Mhm.
someday, maybe, I'm not so sure. What would I talk about? What would you say to people to either encourage them that it's like, yeah, go for it, but at the same time to say, however, you need to take care of these steps. You need to be aware of these things, or else it's going to blow up in your face. So before you submit a proposal, before you get your idea together, before you, what would you say to them to get them in a state of mind, in a state of spirit and soul, where they can say, now I think, having listened to Star, I think I have the inspiration I need to go forward.
Do not give a TEDx or a TED Talk unless you can't live without giving that talk.
Mm.
Your why and the expression of it has to be so big to you that it is worth all of the work and the energy and the nerves and the chaos. And when you give birth to this little TEDx baby, it is not yours anymore. The comments are not yours. People's response is not yours. How many views it gets is not yours. Don't give a talk like this at this level, at this caliber, unless you are unable to process life without doing it, because it first and foremost should be a creative expression for you. And then, yes, we're going to give it to a specific person for a specific reason to give a certain idea. But the TEDx community is built for this like higher than life consciousness and expansion. So don't do it unless you feel like you have to. It's like in your bones to do it.
Now, how are people going to find your TEDx talk on YouTube?
So they can just find it through my name. So Star Hansen. So they can find it on my website as well, starhansen.com. And if you go, it's called Listen to the Monster in Your Closet. And it's that wonderful talk has been spun into classes and books. And I mean, it's that the talk has given birth to so many other babies after it. Like my book, Why the F Am I Still Not Organized? That was founded on the concepts that we refined in the TEDx talk. So you really, it's such a beautiful experience. It just will stretch you and grow you in ways you couldn't even imagine in the best possible sense. So yeah, people can find me for sure on the TED website, on YouTube. And if your listeners want to download like a free copy of the book, they can get it at starhansen.com/podcast, and they can see what a TEDx baby can grow into.
Spell Hansen.
Hansen, like bop, bop, bop. That dates me. It's very specific genre that I'm talking to right now.
Is that the singer Hansen?
It is the singer Hansen, but I actually think that they spell their name differently. So it doesn't quite work, but it almost works. It's almost.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. It's just brilliant thoughts and energy and approach. And I think people will be inspired by this. And I think they'll realize from listening to this is you got to really take it seriously. It's got to be really worth it. But oh my gosh, the payoff to your business, to your self-esteem, to your future in the world in terms of all the ways that it can expand you is well worth it. Would you agree?
Without a doubt, it has been one of the single most important steps in my journey as a business owner and as a human.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you, Star Hansen. It's been a pleasure to see you once again. It's been over 5 years since you did that talk.
I know. I'm ready for another one. My next one is starting to hatch. I can feel her. Starting to take form.
Good.
It's almost time.
Well, then go for it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Doug. It's been so great to see you and come chat with you today.
Good. See you again. All right. Well, that's it for this episode. If you feel that you learned something valuable today, something that you can use that will make your stories stick, stories that make you and your business memorable, marketable, and monetizable, there are 3 things I'd like you to do. First, click on the follow or subscribe button and leave a review wherever you listen. And second, share this podcast with your friends and coworkers, your email list, and on social media. And third, connect with me on LinkedIn. And when you're ready to get serious about taking your stories to the next level, or if you have an important speech, presentation, or TED Talk coming up, or if you want some guidance on how to make the transition to becoming a professional speaker, let's schedule your free 30-minute coaching session where we can get to know each other and see if we're a good fit. And as always, I'd love to hear from you with your questions and comments. Let me know that you're out there listening and learning. You can send an email with your questions, comments, and suggestions to Deborah@DougStevenson.com. That's Deborah, DEBORAH, @DougStevenson.com. Hey, thanks for listening. Until the next episode, I'm Doug Stevenson.